All right, let's speak a bit more about the significance of this gathering and bring in our guest. Professor Mohlopheni Marakalala is part of the South African Medical Research Center for TB Research at Stellenbosch University and joins us now via our video link. Prof, it's lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time for SABC News. Perhaps we can begin by just placing the significance of this gathering. TB has been such a burden in South Africa's society for years now. Is this the first time we're speaking about a vaccine in the country?
Yeah, thank you, Ayanda, and good morning to SABC News listeners. Yes, so this milestone workshop that looks at decision and policy making across processes that introduce a vaccine in South Africa. It was very key, organized by World Health Organization and Department of Health. So actually, as you know, that we've had a vaccine that has been used for over 100 years, but it's less efficient in adults. It's more important in children. So this is more a milestone that having a vaccine that's in advanced clinical stages for testing, it's actually something that requires that we engage all stakeholders from the Department of Health with civil society, and as well as, all community leaders, traditional leaders, and everyone to really understand that everyone is included in the engagement and dialogues about regulating and managing the processes of enlisting the vaccine. So as you asked, actually, surprisingly, as this is actually a milestone sort of gathering that's for the first time actually happening for a promising vaccine, which is long overdue.
Absolutely. And in fact, you've already just, alluded to what I wanted to ask next. There is so much optimism about this particular vaccine. Help us understand where that's coming from.
So obviously, a vaccine takes a long time to trial and test. So a lot of TB vaccines over the years have failed. For instance, in 2013, we had a promising vaccine that failed. So behind the scenes in clinical research, there's been a lot of testing in the current vaccines that are in pipeline. For instance, we have 4 promising vaccines, of which one of the most actually promising is called M72. That is on a clinical trial phase called phase 3, which is where now you're starting to see promising results. But there's still more work that needs to be done to confirm these clinical observations that indeed that this can now pass all required tests to be introduced. So the vaccine in this case, which calls for this early gathering, it's actually because of the promising results we see. But there's still work that needs to be done before we can finally start manufacturing or licensing the vaccine.
Yeah, and I suppose part of that work is envisioned in the regulatory framework that's going to guide this process.
Sure.
Help us understand, what still needs to be done on that front. I mean, for people who don't follow this closely, it may sound very complex and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, even before regulatory or licensing or manufacturing, first to test the vaccine has to pass final stages.
Right.
For example, if the phase 4 clinical trials, as they mentioned, currently there's 20,000 people who are actually enrolled to receive the vaccine as a clinical trial. So the results from that will then determine whether now it enters the next stage, which involve regulatory processes in South Africa. For example, we have SAPRA, which is a body that regulates usage of a new introduction of medicine. There's multiple things, FDA approval, which is global, and as well as because South Africa is strategically located within our sub-Saharan region, if we manage to be the manufacturer of this vaccine, we probably want to also help neighboring countries. So to export such, it would require like procurement, regulatory and policies that would actually be a pooled procurement that is also beyond South Africa. So there's going to be multiple layers of regulatory processes. But the main thing is that when a vaccine is showing that it's efficacious and it works and it meets all the requirements, and then that's when the regulatory processes will take place. But this one, as they said, is actually promising.
Yeah. If there's anything we've learned from COVID-19 is that to get vaccines to a particular place is just one step. It's another making sure that there's enough logistics to transport it within that region and store it safely so that it continues being effective. Insofar as supply and logistics is concerned, how is South Africa positioned to be able to distribute this particular vaccine if, by the way, it passes all those hurdles you've explained?
Luckily or unfortunately, when we have like disasters like COVID-19, there's also like, they say you shouldn't leave a good crisis to go on waste. So some of the things we learned from such crises is our capability is really to upscale and actually reach to communities. So perhaps with the scourge of infectious diseases that South Africa has experienced over the years, that has also enabled us to know how to be prepared to really have resources in place. So for instance, we have about 3 manufacturing companies, like we have BioVac, something called Afrigen and Aspen, that are actually capable to handle at least 3 of the 4 clinical trials. 4 vaccines that are in clinical trials right now. So South Africa also, with the engagement and commitment of government, is very capable to really carry on this. But as you say, the supply chain as well as refrigeration, storages and stuff like that, it need to be considered, particularly in remote areas where such facilities are not there. But not all vaccines actually would require actually storage and refrigeration. So such consideration, you are right, are going to be taken into consideration when you make decisions about processes following manufacturing and actually distribution or administration.
Yeah. I imagine a lot of people who are watching are waiting with keen interest to see how it all unfolds. How worried are you, Prof, about what's emerged in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, issues around vaccine hesitancy creeping in and, becoming a stumbling block, essentially, for the rollout of this particular vaccine? Again, with that caveat, if it does pass this particular stage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, as you can imagine, with COVID-19 and its call for emergency, there had to be like fast-tracked processes, including regulatory processes. That meant that to communities that seem to have been a vaccine that was produced so quick with no thorough engagements to society and communities and also understanding details, but also inclusivity in terms of dialogues. For instance, right now in this workshop, we included traditional healers, we included civil society, as well as activism groups. We included actually everyone to ensure that the dialogue is clear and people actually understand processes. So I think learning from the vaccine hesitancy to some extent we received, and as well as misinformation from COVID lessons, this is a great step that would actually ensure that we mitigate the previous sort of mistakes where actually societal stakeholders at multiple levels would have wanted to be engaged, understand details. So I think I'm not really worried, especially with TB being a scare that everyone is really, really committed to getting rid of this disease that is being really a challenge for centuries. Yeah. So in general, I think with the right consultation that we've started right now and great dialogues that are inclusive, I think we'll beat the challenges that we had with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're all crossing fingers, especially when you consider what is at stake. Professor Mohlopheni Marakalala, appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Professor Marakalala is part of the South Africa Medical Research Center for TB Research with Stellenbosch University. Once again, thanks very much indeed.